Welcome everyone to the Ally Media and Web Accessibility Workshop hosted by ETS. My name is Marika, one of the facilitators for today's workshop. I'm the educational technologist with ETS, and joining me are my two wonderful colleagues from ETS as well, Jamily and Gabrielle. If you guys would like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, my name is Jamily, and my title is Curriculum and Evaluation Consultant here in ETS.
I'm Gabrielle, and I am a learning designer at ETS.
Great, awesome. So we will start off with the land acknowledgement. This event is being hosted on the traditional unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. And to learn more about First Nations and Indigenous territories where we live, play, and work, please visit native-land.ca. And we would also like to extend our invitation to everyone to acknowledge the land upon which you are joining us today in the chat. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Gabby to get it started.
Okay, so before we jump into talking about Ally Media and web accessibility, we would like to invite everyone just to do a quick wellness check. There is a QR code on the screen. Alternatively, we have a link that you can follow that I'm about to post in the chat. But this will be one of our few interactive elements for today's session. So we really encourage and invite everyone to take part. But our wellness check today is just a quick question. What is a word to describe how you are doing these days? You don't need to go into too much detail, just a quick word to describe how you're feeling today as you're joining us on this lovely Monday. So as you're thinking, we'll hopefully have a few words pop up. You can use the link in the chat, or alternatively that. Excellent. Yep, definitely feeling the tired, I think, with the daylight savings change over the weekend. Definitely missing that extra hour of sleep for sure. Okay, so what we'll do now is, now that we've sort of gotten done a bit of a vibe check, we'll come back and go through our agenda for today. Perfect. So we'll be going through three broad topics today. Our first is going to be web accessibility broadly. So looking at web content accessibility guidelines and some of the principles, and then looking at some of those guidelines and some practical applications and tips and tricks of how to make sure you're doing those guidelines justice. We'll also be looking at a tool that is a plugin for Canvas called Ally, which the Faculty of Education has been piloting this term, and look at ways that you can use that to improve courses on Canvas. And then we'll be talking about media accessibility, so things that are available to you at UBC, which you can use to improve the accessibility of any media that you may be including, not just in courses, but for websites, or if you're using video for research or something such as that. So I'm going to pass over to Jamily, who will be going through our web content accessibility guidelines.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Gabby. So as mentioned, today we'll be delving into a variety of elements of web accessibility, starting with an overview of the Web Content Accessibility, or WCAG, guiding principles. So these four principles are known by the acronym POUR, or P-O-U-R, for perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Beginning with perceivable. So for information to be considered perceivable, anyone who accesses the content must be able to gather the same information regardless of their visual, auditory, or kinesthetic abilities. So content cannot be invisible to any of our senses. Examples include alt text, audio files, and captions. We have operable, that's next. So simply put, operable means that content must be able to be fully operated or used by all people, including people who do not navigate the web using a standard keyboard and mouse. So one example is to provide multiple ways to interact with a website or to access documents. Next is U for understandable, which means that instructions must be clear to all users for the content to be considered understandable. So some questions you might ask yourself are, do instructions lead to a logical next step? Are the instructions understandable or logical to a screen reader? So examples might include consistent font, color and sizing, and easy to use navigation structure and labels and headings. And the final letter R stands for robust. And for content to be robust, it must be able to be used on or across different platforms that are accessible to diverse users, screen readers, and assistive technologies. So for example, if the website you're using requires a specific version of a web browser, then it would not be considered robust. The main sentiment here is that to ensure that your content meets the principles of POUR, each guideline must be considered. Okay, and so today we're going to review a variety of ways that you can easily and effectively integrate these POUR principles into your courses, beginning with descriptive links. So when we're talking about a descriptive link, we're referring to a URL. So the link in your browser search bar that starts with www or HTTP. And our goal is to use link descriptions that are both perceivable to everyone, including those who use a screen reader, and understandable so that the intended audience knows where that link will lead them. So plain URLs that are copied from a website are not operable because the screen reader will simply read the URL verbatim and very slowly, which is not only time consuming, but also not understandable because it does not provide details as to where that link will take us. Instead, to make a URL both operable and understandable, we can embed the link into a descriptive phase. So when writing a descriptive phase, it's important to avoid non-descriptive language like click here or read me because it's ambiguous. It doesn't tell us where that link leads us. And non-descriptive text is particularly troublesome for people with visual impairments who use screen reader software, because if every link reads click here, then it becomes onerous to decipher exactly which link relates to what content. It's also important to consider, especially if you're using WordPress or Canvas, to remove this device-specific vocabulary because actions don't look the same on all devices. So rather than use language like click or tap, you could use platform-neutral words like follow, visit, use, or select. And lastly, if you're linking documents like Word or PDF, include the file extension at the end in square parentheses. Okay, so I know that was a little bit high level, so let's review some examples. And the first example we'll review is, for more information on the topic, click here. And this is inaccessible because we don't know what the topic is or where the link leads us. So it's far too ambiguous and not very useful. The next example reads, visit the Canvas community forum guide on how to add events to the calendar to learn more. And this is far more accessible because although it might be long, I know where the link is taking me and what information I might be able to find there. It also includes the word visit rather than click. So again, using platform neutral language. The last example, fill in the form request for extended access PDF, is a great example of how to incorporate the file extension. So if it was a Word document, you could use Word or docx or whatever the file extension is. And this is important for everyone, but especially those who use a screen reader, because it's nice to know whether or not the user might need to open another software to access the content. So we do encourage you to use link text that describes the destination, like the destination's web page or document title, and to include the file extension. Okay, so this covers descriptive links. Up next, we're going to launch into a poll to determine which of the following examples is considered an accessible descriptive link. So we have 4 examples of descriptive links, and we want to know which one is accessible. So which one would you choose to replicate to ensure that links are both operable and perceivable? Okay, the poll is launched. You'll see a prompt pop up on the screen. We'll just give you a few seconds to respond, and then we'll review the answers. Okay. Great. Okay, we've got one response so far for A. Okay. All right, so everyone so far has clicked on A. So click the following link to access our workshops. Okay, interesting. So yeah. So click the following link to access our workshops. I mean, it's very close, but we're using Click, which of course is the language that we're seeking to avoid. And workshops is great, but it doesn't necessarily tell us exactly which workshops we're accessing. So the proper response would be C. So for more information, visit the ETS website worksheet. First, because we're using non-descriptive or neutral language like visit, and second, because we know that it's now an ETS website that covers workshops and events pages. So it's a little bit more descriptive than workshops, but good job, everyone. We're getting there slowly. Did you want to add anything, anyone? Feeling good? Okay. Okay, so now we'll move on to using tables. And let's see, information can be visually presented in a variety of in a very organized kind of fashion using a table. But to a screen reader, it might sound something more like this.
Table with 5 columns and 4 rows. Subject, session, days, time, mode of delivery. East 335, Mon, Wed, 1330 1500 hours, in person, LLED 33430, Wed, 10 o'clock 11 o'clock, in person, Kin 427002, Tuesday, 10:30 12 o'clock, online.
Okay, so if you were able to catch the information about the day of the week that the Kin class is actually being offered, please raise your hand or type your response in the chat, a yes or a no. Okay. Yeah, so it's not particularly simple to kind of digest all of the information in this chart. So this is the table that the screen reader was reading out loud. And here are some tips to make sure that your table is more accessible, specifically to a screen reader. So the first step is to ensure that you're creating an accessible table. To create an accessible table is to include a header, because simple data tables can be easily read by screen readers if they have the proper text and attributes to identify the row and column headers. So if you refer back to our table, you would tag the subject, session, days, time, and mode of delivery as the headers. Next is to avoid the use of merge cells, split cells, and blank cells, because screen readers read the table linearly. And so if you include merge, split, or blank cells, it would be difficult, if not impossible, for the screen reader to read the table out loud in a way that makes sense to the listener. So now that you've heard what a screen reader goes through, you might better understand why it's important that tables are created simply without using anything too complex. So some rules to stand by are to avoid nesting tables within other tables. Also try to keep tables short, because too many rows and columns can make finding information difficult, even with the appropriate text. It's also good practice to add alt text and captions with short summaries of the information to allow the screen reader user to decide whether it makes sense to use the table or whether it will be too time consuming. So lastly, do not use screenshots or tables. Build a table in your document eval or website, because a screen reader cannot read an image, which would make that content completely inaccessible. Okay, so moving forward, We're going to use a graphic to illustrate why we do not use tables for styling. Okay, so for visual readers, the graphic will read, basement toilets must flush up. However, this image is made up of a total of 4 columns and 3 rows. And since the screen readers reads linearly, this is what you would hear if you used a screen reader.
Basement up, toilets flush must.
Okay, so the screen reader would interpret it as basement up and toilets flush must. So as you can hear, it would make no sense to people with visual impairments who rely on a screen reader. Okay, so moving on to our next poll about accessible documents. The question that we'd like to ask you is, what makes this table inaccessible? We have a few options here. So A, merge cells, B, blank cells, C, split cells, D, all of the above, and E, none of the above. So I'll give you a few seconds to answer the question. All of the above. Okay, great. All of the above. Awesome. Okay, great work, everyone. Okay, so the answer is D. Awesome. Well, for all of those reasons, we shouldn't be using merge cells, blank cells, or split cells to make sure that the content is accessible to a screen reader. Okay, so great work. And now I'll pass it over to Gabby.
Okay, so if we're thinking about accessible documents, there are a few things that we want to keep in mind. So if we're going to be sharing any documents, keep in mind that some formats are going to be more accessible than others. So imagine maybe back maybe 10 or so years ago when we would be using photocopiers a lot or scanned documents. Those still exist in the web. You can find them everywhere. Folks often use them for textbook scans as well. But be mindful that often scanned documents are going to be unusable for somebody using a screen reader or somebody who maybe has even a slight visual impairment of some kind. Often they have really poor readability anyway, but a lot of the time, more than that, is that they haven't gone through the optical character recognition process, which is, or OCR process, which basically means that a computer can recognize each character on the page, and thus it is able to be read by a screen reader or highlighted by a cursor. PDFs are great. They're very flexible, but at times they can be inaccessible, often because anything that is scanned or sometimes a print of a page that is turned into an image, often those become PDFs. And so often what we would say is that if you're going to use PDFs, they can be a little difficult to make accessible. So where possible, use a Word document to make a file accessible and then convert it into an accessible PDF. So while, we don't want to discourage the use of PDFs at all, just something to be mindful of, that if you are going to be using them, there's nothing wrong with doing, just being careful that they meet all of those criteria. And as well as that, all of the other items that we're looking at today, things like descriptive links or tables and a few other pieces that I know Marika is going to go through as well, like alt text and headings, those things apply to documents as well. So if you have a PDF that has a lot of images or a Word document, it's really great to be able to adhere to the other sort of principles that we're looking at. So, using color mindfully, making sure that if you're including a table that it has a header and that it's not overly complicated to allow somebody to navigate it easily. Okay, so with that, I'm going to pass over to Marika, who's going to look at the tool Ally and the Canvas accessibility checker.
Great, thanks, Gabby. So I'll now talk about the accessibility checker tools that are available in Canvas, which are Ally and the built-in Canvas accessibility checker. Both tools are there to help you make your course more accessible. I will first introduce you to the tools, then I will show you how they work in Canvas. Next slide, please. Okay, so you will find the rich content editor when creating content in Canvas, such as a page, assignment, and announcement. The checker is built into the editor, so it allows you to run a quick accessibility test on the content that you have created within the editor, and including text, images, and hyperlinks. Some examples that the accessibility checker will flag include pictures that lack alt text, or text that is too small or in a color that doesn't contrast well with the background, which makes reading difficult for users, especially those with visual impairments. The advantages of this checker is that it is integrated into the rich content editor, so it can detect issues within it, and it is also easy to use as it shows the issues and also suggests the action to take for fixing the issue. However, the checker only shows accessibility issues found on the rich content editor of that page. So it won't detect accessibility issues on, let's say, an attached file, and you will be able to see the issues flagged for that particular page while you're in the edit mode for that page, but there isn't an overview accessibility report for the entire course. And apart from the Canvas accessibility checker, there is Ally. So Ally is an accessibility checking tool that is integrated into Canvas. The Faculty of Education is taking part in the pilot of this tool, and all courses this term within the faculty actually have this tool enabled. And Ally has already been in use in courses at UBC, and it has been widely used within Master of Educational Technology program courses to improve accessibility. It also adheres to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which ensure the content is as equitable and accessible as possible. And unlike the Canvas built-in accessibility tool, Ally actually generates a comprehensive report that lists all the detectable issues, and it also shows which of them are top priorities to fix. And this tool also provides in-the-moment learning opportunities because apart from letting you know how to fix the issue, it also explains why it is important and how it can benefit the learner if the issue is fixed. Another unique advantage of Ally is that it provides students with alternative formats, which means that they can download the text content in various formats from a Canvas page. One drawback of Ally is that it is very sensitive in picking up all the accessibility issues in all content within the course that is programmed to detect. So it may still pick up a lot of issues in the course that are fairly accessible. And another con for Ally is that it can decontextualize the issue when it is being viewed in the report rather than within the course content. There are three main elements of Ally, which include accessibility report, accessibility indicators, and alternative formats. And we will see where they appear in Canvas during the demo as well. So for accessibility report, back to the slide. Yeah. So Ally's course accessibility report provides an overview of the accessibility issues found in the entire course. So you can get the big picture, and it is also grouped by content type. And there is also an overview accessibility score, which I will show you in the report later, that is actually calculated based on the potential accessibility issues found in each piece of content, no matter if it is published or not. And then for the accessibility indicators, they are only visible to instructors or TA of the course. And it shows up on items within the accessibility report, as well as on all embedded content, including images, files, and videos uploaded to Canvas throughout the course. The color and needle direction of the indicator provide feedback on the accessibility of the course content or files. Last but not least, the alternative formats, which is also the only feature available to students, is the alternative format for content. It allows students to download the text content in multiple alternative formats, such as an audio MP3 file or electronic braille. The alternative formats available depend on the original content. Some formats are only available for certain file types. If you don't see an option to download alternative formats, the file is not a supported content type. Okay, so now I'll show you how the tools actually work in Canvas. Okay. Okay, I will show you how first Ally is integrated in Canvas. So when Ally is enabled in the course, you will be able to find accessibility report on the course navigation menu. So when I click on it, so what you will first see is that this is the accessibility report. You will see the overall score and also the issues that are easiest to fix and the ones that are with the lowest score on this report. And underneath, there's also a list of all the issues found in the course. So here in my course here, there are 4 issues, and actually some of them are very common issues that are flagged by Ally in most of the course, and which includes not having a description for image, which is also called alt text. And then there is contrast issue, and also the heading structure of the content is not appropriate. So now let's take a look together with this one, which is the alt text one. So I'll let you know how Ally can actually guide you through understanding and fixing the issue. So when you click on it, there is if states which image is lacking of the alt text. So when we click on it, so here's the image, and it also, when you click on what this means, it will then tell you what alt text is, which is an image description that connects the image to its context and allows students with visual impairments to perceive the image. And it also mentions that the descriptions should be brief and convey the full meaning of the image, and something as brief as the file name will not be descriptive enough or helpful for students to understand. And then on the next page, it actually also describes why it is important to have image descriptions. So it helps. So first, it helps provide better context by connecting the image to the context that it's being used. And then it also helps with searching of the image easier. And most importantly, it is essential for students with visual impairments who rely on the image description to perceive the information and acquire equivalent experience. And then after understand why it is important, Ally also have a guideline on how to write a good description or good alt text. So let's click on it. So there are a few tips that Ally provides. So the first one is provide a textual alternative. The description should provide a textual alternative to the image so that people can picture the image in their head and to connect the image with the context, and describe the image based on the page context and convey the full meaning of the image. Okay. So here's also, so it also provides example of what Ally would consider as a good alt text for this image. So going to the next tip, it's provide a meaningful description. So don't use the file name as the alt text, as it is usually not descriptive enough. So here are some examples that Ally provided. Then the next one is also keep the description brief and context specific. Consider the purpose of the image because different descriptions can be given to the same image depending on the message you want to convey. So take a example here is that this painting of the poppy flowers, it will have a different description for, let's say, a history class versus in the art class. And then the next one would be provide a summary for complex charts, graphs, and maps. So if you have complex images like infographics or charts, write a separate captions or summary for the image instead. And so here's some example of how you should write a description rather than putting it as an alt text for this chart. So the last one would be decorative images. So for images that don't represent any relevant content and are only for decorative purposes, identify them as decorative in the alt text. Okay, so after learning how to write a good alt text, let's put it into practice. Okay, so I will now close this. Okay, so back to the module. Here is actually the page where I included the image that we saw that was flagged by Ally. So before we do this question, I would just want to show you two other elements that I mentioned earlier on Ally. So here is the Ally accessibility indicator. So the red indicator means that it needs to be fixed, and clicking on it will bring us back to the window that we just saw. It'll take some time. Yeah, so this is the window that we just browsed through. And so apart from the indicator, there's also the alternative format that I mentioned is available for students. So it will be this A icon with an arrow that is next to the page title. Okay, there's this pop-up on my screen. Just a second. Okay, so this is the icon that is for alternative formats. So when you click on this icon, it will show the alternative formats that can be made available for this page for students to download. So there are like EPUB, audio, and then files that are for specific screen readers. And so you can just click on it and then click download, and then it will create the alternative formats. Okay, so back to this question. So after learning how to write a good alt text from Ally, so based on this picture on the left, which of the following is the best alt text for this image? So there are three options, A, B, and C. Okay, I think we got the answer B. Yep, that's correct. So it's great that you guys also didn't pick A. So A, Tower of Pisa in Italy. So it's actually too brief, too concise, and too short to give the user much context if that person has never been or doesn't know what Tower of Pisa looks like. And on the other hand, option C is too descriptive and provides too much information that could be irrelevant to the message that this image is trying to convey. It is also actually advised to keep the alt text less than 125 characters. So for long descriptions, it should be included on the page content or as captions instead. So great job, everyone. Okay, so after talking about alt text, we'll move to content structure, which is also another common accessibility issues that Ally picks up. So content needs to follow styled structure conventions in order for the content to sound logical when read by a screen reader. And well-structured content also help learners to understand the context and facilitates reading. Add the content structure tag, such as heading 1, heading 2, paragraph, to format the content instead of using font styling, like font size, bold, etc., because the screen reader will read out the structured text, but not the font styling. So let's take an example here. On this page, the content may seem to be very structured pretty well, but that is actually only limited to visually. So when we click onto the edit mode of this page, you can see that when you click on the content type here is actually P, meaning it's all paragraph. So none of these headings were given any structure tag, meaning that all of this content will be read as paragraph by a screen reader. And what will this actually sound like when read by a screen reader? Let's listen to it. Okay.
You are currently on primary colors. Subtractive model, red. Information on the color red. Here is some more information. Blue. Information on the color blue. Here is some more information about blue.
Okay, so it just reads out all the text. So without the content structure, it will be really difficult to understand the context without seeing the passage. And if we want to improve the content structure, here is what we can do. Okay, so here, so you can see it actually looks the same on this passage, but when we click on the edit mode, what we can do is we can highlight the text and then assign the heading tag to it. So currently this one is with heading 2, and then the next one it's heading 3. So when you select the title or the heading, just select the structure tag here. So heading 2, heading 3, heading 4. Make sure you don't skip the headings. So it should go from heading 1 to heading 2 to heading 3, and so on and so forth, but not from heading 1 to heading 3. And if you have more subheading levels, let's say you have like heading 5 or 6, which is not included in this drop-down list, what you can do is you highlight the text and then in format, and then pick formats and then headings. So there will be more headings here. So there are 1, 2, 3, up to 6. And if you have even more headings than heading 6, and if you are comfortable working with HTML code, you can also edit via the HTML editor by clicking this button here. So you can see that like for colors, now it's with heading 2. So you can just amend this number here, and then you will then adjust the level of the headings. Okay, so after this passage is added with heading or content structure tag, let's hear what the screen reader will be reading out.
Heading level 2, primary colors. Heading level 3, subtractive model. Heading level 4, red. Information on the color red. Here is some more information about red.
Okay, so it actually gives learners a much clearer content structure and can help them to understand the content better. Okay, so next one. After talking about content structure, there's also another accessibility issues that Checker will always pick up, which is color contrast. Colors are often used for emphasizing or styling to attract or engage learners. Text with poor contrast can be difficult to read for everyone, but especially for people with visual impairments such as color blindness. as you cannot check the exact ratio of the contrast just by looking at the color and its background. There are actually many color contrast tools available online, such as contrastchecker.com, that you can simply enter the hex code of the color to get the ratio. Apart from ensuring high contrast between text and the background, you may also consider grayscale, which eliminates color combination that is hard to distinguish. So people with visual impairments such as color blindness can view the images or text more easily. Using a lot of colors can be visually overwhelming for readers, adding unnecessary cognitive load. So using colors sparingly and mindfully will avoid detracting from the content. And we never want to avoid people from using colors, but just to use them mindfully. Another thing to avoid is using colors to avoid using colors to convey meaning or information on diagrams, maps, charts, or other forms of graphics. So in this case, you can see on this chart here, try using different forms, shapes, or patterns to make the difference more noticeable or easy to distinguish. Okay, so here are some examples. We have a bad example here of color combination. It is bad because of the choice of color, which is pink and green. So people with red-green color blindness could have difficulty reading it. And the contrast ratio between the two colors is actually not up to the Web Content Accessibility Guideline as well. And we can improve it by using grayscale of these two colors. So it improves accessibility by removing the colors that are difficult to distinguish for people with color blindness, even though the contrast is still too low. So here comes a good example of color combination that is accessible to the learner as it has high contrast and is not a common color combination that is difficult for people with color blindness to read. And you can see here that unlike the alt text, we don't have any indicator from Ally that shows the color contrast issue on this page. However, when you are in the edit mode of this page, you will see this icon that is accessibility checker icon. So this is actually the Canvas built-in accessibility checker. So when you click on it, it will then actually find out the issue here that the color contrast is not high enough. So in case of color contrast, Canvas built-in checker is actually a better tool in picking up the color contrast, and also easier for you to just directly pick the color to replace so that the color contrast will improve. So let's say I'll pick this darker color here and then I click apply. So it will then immediately change the font color on the page. And then so one more is the grayscale font color here. So when I make it to a darker color and apply, so it will then immediately apply and fix the issue directly on the page. Okay, so therefore, Ally and Canvas built-in accessibility checker are both very useful and comes hand in hand and complement each other. So we recommend using both tools to make your course more accessible. Okay, and that's it from Ally and Canvas accessibility checker tools. So I will pass to Gabby to talk more about media accessibility.
Thanks, Marika. So today we're going to be looking at a few different tools that are available at UBC that you can use to improve the accessibility of the media that you're sharing. So a quick few pieces about media accessibility. Media is a really great way to engage people. We definitely want to encourage folks to use all of the amazing media that's available to us, videos, podcasts, all kinds of amazing things. But it can be completely inaccessible if you don't have any appropriate alternatives to provide alongside that media. So the good news is that at UBC, we have access to free captioning and transcript services through Kaltura. And if you're familiar with YouTube, which I imagine you are, YouTube does actually provide auto captioning for videos now, which is really cool. Another thing to keep in mind now, is that Zoom, which is what we're using now, does have closed captioning services as well for in-session captions. But the cool thing as well about this is that when you're recording is that Zoom can actually record your captions and transcripts for you, which is really helpful, especially if you're, for example, making lecture videos and you're using Zoom as the way to record those. You can immediately get a transcript for that session or for that recording, which is really, really helpful. And then finally, if you are going to be using a video or especially a podcast, if you have access to a transcript, which I know oftentimes podcast websites will host the transcript for their podcast, that's really useful to include for students, or in general, if you're just updating something on WordPress for your departmental website, having a transcript for any audio only pieces is really important. So go on the lookout, especially for podcasts. Oftentimes there are transcripts available. It's just a matter of linking to them. So we're going to do a bit of tool exploration now. Before we do that, and something else that we wanted to bring up, especially again, if we're thinking about media accessibility, is that even if we can provide English language translations of things using captioning transcripts, English isn't everyone's first language, and oftentimes, especially if we're thinking about folks who are deaf and hard of hearing, ASL might be their first language. And so in that case, translation is an awesome option as well. So let's have a look at our first tool today, which is Kaltura. So I'm going to go through a few little pieces here and then demonstrate how you can do some cool things with Kaltura. So Kaltura is a UBC supported tool, which you can use to host videos. The website for Kaltura is https://learning.video.ubc.ca. I will share that link in the description in our chat in a moment. But the cool thing about Kaltura is that it does include a machine-generated captioning service. So that means that you don't really have to do anything. You upload your video to Kaltura and then you generate some captions for it. So it's really, really helpful to have that service. From experience, those captions can be relatively accurate. Usually the machine-generated captions will give you a percentage of accuracy based on what it's sort of experienced. And usually that tends to be about like 86%. Sometimes it's a bit higher, but in my experience, it tends to be relatively accurate. Obviously, it won't be perfect, but it's a really good starting place for sure. The cool thing about those captions then is that they are really easily turned into a transcript. So if you wanted to provide just a text version of your video, obviously having the captions in the video is helpful, but you might also want to provide the text, so you can copy that and add that to a course or web page or whatever it is that you're using. As well as that, after it's generated your captions or transcript, you can edit it. So if it's not particularly accurate or you're finding that it keeps making the same error, you can go through that transcript and edit it, which is really helpful. And the editing, especially for the captions, is sort of done with timestamps. So you can skip to different pieces of the video. You can listen to it and double check that actually the captions are accurate, which is helpful. And finally, if you are really ahead of everyone and you already have a caption file for your video, if you have an SRT file, for example, you can upload that to Kaltura as your captions rather than having to machine generate them. So you have a few options, which is awesome. So what we'll do now is jump onto this website. I'm going to demonstrate how you can get those captions and then show you what the editing function looks like. So I'm just going to share the website, and I know Marika has very kindly put it in the chat, so you're welcome to have a look as well. Kaltura is CWL login, so it's really easy to access. And what we'll do really quickly is I'm going to add a video. And then when you upload a video, and I'll choose something super small so it doesn't take very long, what you'll find is, I'll just do this one. Quick short video, nice and fast to upload. Awesome. So I'm going to keep it here, I'm going to save. And then when I go to media, once I've uploaded my file, you'll see that you have quite a few options for editing. So I'm going to go here and in actions, underneath my video, I'll see that I have a few options, but the one that I'm really going to be looking at is this caption and enrich. So if I select caption and enrich, I will get some options. And it will have a list of any existing requests I've made for captions. Now, in this case, I haven't made any requests yet. I just uploaded the video. So I will have a little notice just letting you know that, you know, there's copyright things to keep in mind. And if you're uncomfortable with the caption file being posted outside of Canada, just something to be mindful of. But isn't an issue in terms of requesting those captions. But you'll see here that we have machine, English, and captions, and I'm just going to hit submit. And then now I have a request. It says it's not ready. I have to wait until it's finished uploading, but that will be how you make your request. And once you've done that, you will have the captions there. And being processed. The turnaround for these caption files tends to be about 30 minutes. It varies, obviously, depending on the length of the video. If it's something short, it usually doesn't take 30 minutes. If it's something quite long, it might take a bit longer than that. So just keep in mind that if you're making something really like last minute and you need the captions now, it will take approximately 30 minutes for those captions to generate. So let's have a look at an example of a video that I made earlier, which has captions already enabled. And so I'm just going to pop into this video here, and I'm going to edit the captions. So rather than going to what we did before with caption and enrich, I'm going to go into edit. So again, I'm at the bottom of the video and I have actions here. You'll see that I have this show transcript option now, which is cool. But if I wanted to edit the captions, I'll click on edit. And then if my computer is being cooperative, it will load. Gorgeous. Okay, so you'll see here I have now a lot of options, but the one I'm going to go for is captions. And then you'll see I have this the details of my captions here. So it's generated the caption file. I can download those captions if I wanted to do some extra editing external to Kaltura, but I can also edit the captions directly in Kaltura as well. So if I click on edit captions, I will get into this caption editor. And what I can do is watch the video and go through, and I have all of these timestamps, and then I can edit what you've got here. So I can already see here that I think that interruption is probably wrong, having made this and looking at the screen. Yep, so it shouldn't be interruption, it should be interaction. So I'm going to change that and then save. So this is a really simple way to have captions automatically generated. It's really, really easy to get the captions. And then if you have time to go in and edit them, obviously that's ideal. But generally speaking, like there were only a couple of small issues with this video, the video captions. So it was really good to be able to change them. And so now that I've finished editing my captions, I can go back. Again, if it's going to be cooperative, which I'm hoping it will. And then if I go back to those captions, again, if I wanted to share a transcript with my class or with add a transcript to the website, then I can always download that file and then upload it as a transcript if I wanted to. The other cool thing as well is that if I'm out of the editing page, what I can do is look at the transcript beneath and just copy and paste that as well. That's another option rather than downloading it as a separate file. So again, I'll quickly show you here, show transcript, and then I can copy and paste that if I want. Okay. So I'm going to get Jamili to go back to the slides, and we're going to quickly talk about how to use Zoom. Thank you. So Zoom is something that we use all the time. Everyone is at this point, I think, pretty well versed with using Zoom, but just keep in mind that Zoom is constantly updating itself. There are always new features that they are releasing, so things may have changed since the last time you had a look at your Zoom settings. The cool thing with Zoom is that it can be configured to not just produce captions, but also to save those captions and transcripts for both meetings and for recorded Zoom meetings as well. The other cool feature that I discovered actually recently is that you can set up particular roles within your Zoom meeting. So if you have a foreign language interpreter or a sign language interpreter, you can give that role to somebody, which will facilitate people knowing where to look and who to pin in their meeting if they need the interpretation available easily. The other nice thing that is would be potentially useful for students is that you can allow any participant in your meeting to save closed captions if they wanted to review it in a sort of minute style format. And then once you've enabled those closed captions, it is then up to the individual user in a meeting to turn them on. So much like we did with today's session, we just let everyone know that captions were available and that they could turn them on by selecting show captions at the bottom of their toolbar on the Zoom client. If you don't see the option show captions, you can click more or select more and then select captions, and it will enable captions for you. So we're going to have a quick look at how you can enable these settings in Zoom. So I'm going to share my screen again. And this time, rather than looking at Kaltura, we're going to be having a look at Zoom settings, which, tedious though that sounds, they can be a little finicky to find. So I'm just going to go into my Zoom account and show you where to find those settings just to facilitate your ability to enable. So when you're in your Zoom account, you're going to want to go to settings, and that's in the side menu on the left. So when I choose settings, I'll be given the option to look at the settings for meetings and the settings for recordings. The settings for meetings are numerous. You'll see that there's quite a few different subsections, and we're going to jump to in meeting advanced settings. So when I go here, it'll have quite a few settings above, but I'm going to scroll down just a little bit until I get to this part here. So manual captions are an option. This might be useful if some of the automated caption languages are ones that you're not using for your meeting. So if you need somebody to add captions, you can always assign that role, and then somebody would manually caption the session. However, the easiest option by far, especially if you are speaking one of the languages that are listed below, will be the use of automated captions. So I have that enabled. It may not be automatically enabled on your account, so it's definitely worth checking. And then beneath, you have the full transcript option. So allow viewing of full transcript in the meeting side panel. That's really, really helpful to have on. Another option too is this save caption. So that means that any participant, so not yourself as the host, but anyone who is joining that meeting, that will allow them the option to save their captions if they would like. And as I was saying as well, language interpretation. So if you wanted to give somebody the role of an interpreter within your meeting, you can definitely do that. And that would just facilitate people being able to find who they are and pin them if that's something that hasn't been done through the administration of the meeting. So that's all live session business. Say, for example, you're making a lecture recording. I know a lot of instructors use Zoom for lecture recordings because it's just a really easy tool to use. Everyone's really familiar with it. It lines things up nicely. You can share your screen. But if you wanted to generate, again, captions or a transcript, you would go into your recording settings and find them there. So if you're doing a local recording, meaning a recording to your computer, what you'll need to do is enable a closed caption as a BTT file. So earlier when we were talking about Kaltura, we talked about an SRT file, which is another type of caption file. If you wanted to upload these captions to a different platform, just be mindful that BTT and SRT are different caption file types. The only difference is that one uses a comma and one uses a period for showing the time, but it just means that it may not be compatible with the platform that you're uploading it to. So just be mindful of that. BTT files are totally like common, so it's unlikely that they will be completely incompatible, but just letting you know that it is less common than SRT, which tends to be the standard caption file type, but something that you can definitely get by recording locally to your computer. So having that saved closed captions file for local recordings. If you're recording to the cloud, meaning that all of your recordings won't be hosted on your personal computer, it will be in your meeting or your Zoom account online, you have a few more options for captions and transcripts. So you'll see here that I have a few options. I can save my chat messages if I want to. I can have an audio transcript created, which is helpful. I can save my closed captions as a BTT file as well. So this, again, super useful for you if you have a recording and you want captions for them. So if I now go into my recordings, and there aren't many of them, but I will be able to see a recent recording that lasted for about 3 seconds because it was an accident. But it's sort of helpful in illustrating the fact that you can generate your captions and transcripts. So you'll see here I have this recording. I can see that I have the audio transcript. I can download that separately if I wanted to. But another cool thing with Zoom is that if I click on the recording, I can actually edit the captions, which is really, really helpful. Much like with Kaltura, these captions are machine generated, so they may not be perfect. And I'm not going to play this, but you can see here that I have these captions, and if I wanted to edit, I could do so like that. So again, I would click on that edit icon and change the transcript, edit the captions if I need to. Again, really, really helpful. So those are some of the things that Zoom provides as an option, which are really, again, if you're trying to up the accessibility of some of the media that you're sharing, of your own lectures or videos that you've created, this is a really easy way to generate captions and is like relatively low effort, but makes a big impact. So finally, after talking about Zoom, and I'll get Jamil to share my final slide, is talking a little bit about ASL interpretation. Now, of course, ETS, while we are very tech savvy, ASL interpretation is something that we in-house is something that we don't do. So that's something to keep in mind, that if you do require ASL interpretation, if it's a student's requirement, then that's something that they will personally need to request. And that would be done through the Center for Accessibility here at UBC. So students would submit a request either for live interpretation or for retroactive interpretation of course materials. If you are a faculty or staff member who requires ASL interpretation, again, that's something that ETS is not able to do, but you can request those through workplace accommodation. So that would be via workplace.accessibility@ubc.ca. However, with that being said, we do assist with any of the sort of tech requirements to facilitate ASL interpretation. So, for example, if you're wanting to translate materials into ASL and you want assistance with how to configure your screen, or if you were thinking about having a few different elements as part of a lecture, we can definitely help with that. So even if we can't provide the interpretation service, we can definitely help with getting it online. So do be in definitely get in touch if you have any questions about ways that you could incorporate interpretation if it's needed for you into course materials or anything like that. Okay. So I think we are going to start wrapping up. We managed to get through our material with some time to spare for questions, which is awesome. So much like we did earlier at the beginning of our session, we had a little bit of a going to say vibe check again, a wellness check just to see how everyone was doing. But something that we thought would be cool would be maybe a little bit of reflection time. If there was a practice tip or resource that you would share with a colleague after this session, we would love to know what it was that you found useful today. So I'm going to share the link in the chat and I'll share my screen just so we can have a look at some of those responses. But otherwise, while we're wrapping up, if anyone has any questions about anything that we've looked at today or any other questions about web accessibility, please do let us know. We are here and available for you. Okay. So if we don't have any questions, we might start wrapping up. So I'll get Jamili maybe for you to share our final slides. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for attending. If you don't mind filling out a very brief survey, just basically about, what you learned today and some of the takeaways, but also future workshops that you might want to attend and learn from, then please do fill out this survey for us. We'll put the link in the chat for you in just a moment. We also would like to invite you to our upcoming workshops. So we have many more, but these are the ones upcoming in March. So we do have one on hybrid classrooms and workshops on March 15th, instructor presence in virtual spaces on March 22nd, and one on, this is a viewpoint session actually titled Indigeneity, Accessibility and Technology, and that will be on March 29th. Also, please feel free to connect with us at any point in time. So you can follow us on Twitter at UBC_ETS. You can also subscribe to our mailing list if you'd like some frequent updates on what the ETS is up to and what workshops are provided. But you can also just contact us to book a one-on-one consultation. Or visit our website to learn more. And our website is, ets.educ.ubc.ca. This is also where you can find the recordings for our workshops. And we'd just like to thank everyone so much for attending and for your active participation, and we hope that you learned something today.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I think if we don't have any more questions, we might finish up. So thank you for coming.
Bye-bye
we'll
and
end our
have a
session.
great day.
Bye.